Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video will focus on some of the political, social, and cultural impacts of recent feminism on society, especially the last 30 to 40 years. More specifically, I've chosen the works of three scholars to analyze. The short book We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Adichie, adapted from one of her TEDx talks, alongside an essay written by Kimberly Crenshaw titled Demarginalizing the Intersection of Race and Sex, a Black Feminist Critique of Anti-Discrimination Doctrine, Feminist Theory, and Anti-Racist Politics, and the article Feminism and Democracy by Jane Mansbridge. Now, what is feminism exactly? According to Merriam-Webster, feminism is the belief in an advocacy of the political, economic, and social equality of the sexes expressed through an organized activity on behalf of women's rights and interests. As it says on this page, anyone can be a feminist. There are also other definitions. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, it's advocacy of the equality of the sexes and the establishment of the political, social, and economic rights of the female sex, the movement associated with this. According to UN Women, feminism is the belief that anyone, regardless of gender, should have equal rights and opportunities. Robert Dale Parker, in his book How to Interpret Literature, begins his section on feminism saying, while feminism criticism certainly has method and has changed literary critical method in general, it is not so much a method in itself as an area of interest and even a commitment. Historically, feminism has existed for over a century, although individual people who today we would call feminists existed for much longer, crying out for the rights of women within a misogynist society. The variety of feminist debates leads us to a rough historical outline that loosely tracks feminism through a series of three waves. First wave feminism focused on establishing women's rights, such as the right to own property and the right to vote, officially recognized in the United Kingdom partly in 1918 and fully in 1928, and in the United States in 1920. Second wave feminism defined itself among a broader cultural agenda, beginning in the 1960s. While in practical politics, second wave feminism mirrored first wave feminism because it often concentrated on achieving equal rights, the theoretical movements most associated with second wave feminism concentrated more on describing or even celebrating the distinctiveness and specialness of women, sometimes under such rubrics as cultural feminism or difference feminism. Cultural feminism claimed a women's culture that was kinder, gentler, and more peaceful than the dominant culture, while difference feminism was less interested in equal rights than in establishing women's difference and superiority. Second wave feminism often focused on a sense of sisterhood and shared identity among all women. But to some feminists, that sense that all women shared the same identity came to ring false. For that reason, many feminists reacted against second wave feminism, which sparked third wave feminism. Third wave feminism objected to second wave feminism as essentialist and sought instead to build a feminism that focused more on the variety of women, making a point of including women of all races and building coalitions across racial and national boundaries. In practice, most feminist critics and theorists today do not define themselves entirely through this or that wave. They may favor third wave feminism, but they draw on all three waves to pursue non-essentialist, political, and cultural agendas. Back to Chimamanda Adichie, who is a Nigerian writer who received a bachelor's degree from the Eastern Connecticut State University and often moves between Nigeria and America. A firm believer in feminism, she also gives lectures around the world. Her TEDx talk and book We Should All Be Feminists addresses the concerns of feminism today. She clarifies that feminism does not seek to reverse gender roles or subject men to women's authority, nor do feminists hate men or marriage. Feminists recognize that there are differences between men and women, but they seek to limit gender stereotypes that go far beyond that difference. Adichie provides several examples from her personal life, both in America and in Nigeria. Once, after she gave a young Nigerian man a tip, that Nigerian man thanked the man that Adichie was traveling with instead of her. In Nigerian bars, women are often not allowed to enter without a man by their side. Additionally, men are expected to be the head of corporations and are praised for qualities such as toughness or anger, while women are not. Adichie tells the story of a particular man in a managerial position who was blunt and hard-charging and was particularly strict about the signing of timesheets. Eventually, a new manager, a woman, took over. Early on, she exhibited similarities to her old boss, including strictness over the timesheets. However, employees complained about her style, calling her aggressive and difficult to work with, and recommending that she bring a woman's touch to her job. That is an example of sexism engraved into today's culture. Another time, when Adichie was teaching a class, she didn't know what to wear because she wanted to be herself and also be taken seriously. These examples are only a few that help express Adichie's idea that feminism is still necessary today. Many men do not actively try to be misogynist, but they may still have culturally ingrained sexist perspectives or attitudes, or do not stand up for women when necessary. Adichie then shifts to talk about how culture and families raise boys and girls. Often, boys are taught to be tough, to be the breadwinner, to avoid vulnerability. Contrarily, girls are meant to please boys, to have some ambition but not too much. Parents often get to know a boy's girlfriend, but aren't as interested in the girl's boyfriend. Culture praises women for virginity more than it does for men. So overall, Adichie wants everyone to be a feminist and focus on what is right, not necessarily reversing gender norms, but undermining their societal significance. Adichie's ideas and experience are related to the ideas shown by Kimberly Crenshaw in her piece. Also a black feminist, Crenshaw focuses on the intersectionality between race and sex, where she addresses the problematic tendency to treat race and gender as mutually exclusive categories of experience and analysis. The UCLA and Columbia Law School professor illuminates society's failure to acknowledge compounding forms of discrimination on black women. This is fascinating. Instead of simply a sum of the issues present with racist and sexist societies, although at times that may appear to be so, black women often have their own experiences that can go beyond the scope of mainstream feminine or black experiences. Crenshaw provides several examples of black women in different industries who are discriminated against. Oftentimes, they could not sue the companies as black women. Instead, they had to choose which forms of discrimination they were fighting against. Additionally, the fields of feminists and black activists are often permeated by white women and black men, specifically, often including black women. Many feminist arguments do not feel relevant to black women. For example, the notion of women as dependent, limited in abilities, and passive in comparison to men's independence and superiority is in conflict with typical views of black women, who are not seen as passive. Another example is the fact that black women have traditionally worked outside the home in numbers far exceeding the labor participation rate of white women. Oftentimes, the experiences of black women were very distinct from those of white women or a black man. A dangerous effect of this issue is the problem of rape. Throughout history, the rape of a black woman by a white man was virtually unthinkable, and black women received little to no protection because they were not viewed as chaste. Additionally, people within these movements had feared that anti-rape agendas may undermine anti-racist objectives, because black men raping white women was a destruction of white female sexuality and punishable by lynching. Let me repeat. The black community was, at times, fearful of the impacts of anti-rape campaigns. On the contrary, the rape of a black woman by a white man may not even have been recognized. Throughout her arguments, Crenshaw includes nuance, even though her beliefs are firm. This unique intersectionality can bring many different forms of discrimination, which Crenshaw compares to an accident within an intersection, where traffic can come from several different angles and cause innumerable types of accidents. The point of this is that black women can experience discrimination in any number of ways, and that the contradiction arises from our assumptions that the claims of exclusion must be unidirectional. Now on to our third and final scholar, Jane Mansbridge. She wrote an article on connection between feminism and democracy. Generally, she thinks that feminism, like democracy, seems to think not as I, but as we. She begins the article by looking at the importance of democracy for the greater good, and how it has often been thought of as most equal society because of how decisions are made by rational beings. However, there is nuance because of the views of different scholars and analytics, such as Marx and his separate theories. Afterwards, she addresses how, throughout history, our world has been a men's world, yet women's voice in our society can benefit society as a whole. Women are trained to be different from men, for example, by being better listeners, i.e., speaking less, or to live for the purposes of marrying a good man or being good caretakers. Mansbridge also notices that, despite clear misogyny, some of these differences can benefit women in certain ways, just how women's listening skills can help them as leaders, and how their learned empathy can help them interpret facial expressions and other interpersonal cues. Throughout her essay, she recognized the double-edged sword that is used when recognizing and examining the differences between men and women. As a young man myself, I often wonder what I can do to be a feminist or to encourage equality between the sexes. To begin with, I do not understand exactly how patriarchal values are harming women and men today, and what I can do to help this problem. Since I have also seen backlash against feminism from men's rights and Christian communities, I am often unsure what it would mean for me, personally, to be a feminist. In addition to Adichie's points about standing up for women, Crenshaw provides an example. where she was forced to enter the back door to a meeting solely because she was a woman, and the man she was with did not protest. Although this example clearly deals with intersectionality because they would be the only black people in the meeting, I've similarly noticed uncomfortable situations where I didn't act. As an athlete who competes in track and field, I cannot diminish the difference between the sexes on the athletic scene, because total equality would mean that no women would qualify to compete in elite events in track and field. There must be some middle ground, where females can be treated as equals while being respected for their differences and skills. To be fair, I've often engaged in thoughts that were affected by sexism, whether that be objectification of women or believing what culture says about how women are intellectually inferior or destined to be dominated by a man. I think researching for this video has opened my eyes to the effect that sexism has on society, even how addressing this topic benefits both men and women. In each article I looked at, the authors draw conclusions that they find most relevant. Robert L. Parker provides a limited but still useful test to compare whether a work should be viewed or not, the Bechdel test, where the work must have at least two women, they must talk to each other, and they must talk to each other about something other than a man. Adichie's main point in her article is that we need to focus on ability, or focus on interest instead of gender. She addresses this specifically when looking at children and how we raise them up. She also says to stand up for what is right, whether you are a man or a woman. Crenshaw's point is to focus on the most disadvantaged, place them at the center, restructure and remake the world while necessary. Instead of focusing solely on sexist or racist debates, society should focus on who is most disadvantaged. One of Mansbridge's points is that society should take women and motherhood seriously. Also, Mansbridge at one point notes that even in the future, when I expect the significance of gender to diminish greatly, biological sex will still be sexy. Personally, I find the difference between sex and gender and what implications that has for society to be very interesting. There are diverse views encompassing evidence ranging from anecdotal to experimental about the mental and psychological differences between men and women, but I have not seen conclusive results, or at least not ones that have been generally accepted to be conclusive. Personally, I expect more differences to be found as time moves on, as I do not expect that gender norms arose from thin air. Nonetheless, feminism is here to stay, and I encourage all of you to reflect on its impacts in your life. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.